Get over here!
I wanted to focus more on tricks that were put into the games designed by the developers, but I'm going to devote 20% of this list to player-on-player jesting. Be warned, this next one gets a little mean-spirited, but what better place for that than Dark Souls? Guys, Dark Souls is hard. It's not the hardest game I've ever played. The key to victory is really just patience, resilience, and learning from your mistakes. But that means you're going to make a lot of mistakes. I would describe it as brutal but forgiving, thanks to the ease of respawning at the last checkpoint you've activated, encouraging trial and error. What doesn't help is this game's unique community element. I'm not talking about visiting each other's game worlds where you can team up with other players or even invade their playthrough or just kill them because you're a jerk. What I'm talking about is the more passive-aggressive tradition of leaving messages. In a perfect world, players would pen these messages for future dungeon crawlers, giving them experienced wisdom that might shorten the process of figuring out how to proceed. But this is the internet, and that means trolling. Whether it's a completely unhelpful comment like, "Campfire ahead, 2 feet from the campfire," or an outright lie that could lead you to taking hits, almost every message I've seen has either been useless or downright harmful to my play experience. An easy one is telling players that there's a secret area or an invisible bridge if they jump off a certain cliff. Yeah, let's see how that one goes. Others include making an upcoming boss encounter as a safe zone, or the most hilarious to me, putting the message somewhere that the hero really shouldn't be standing. It's the equivalent of pointing at someone's shirt and flicking them on the nose when they look. Except instead of flipping them on the nose, you're thrust kicking them into the nearest ravine. But at the end of the day, how much more angry can I really get? The only price is death, and that's something I've grown accustomed to in my 89th retry of Blighttown. So, what's one more stab to the stomach? At least now there's a little more variety to this game's crock. You really want to mess with other players, though? Maybe take this misdirection to a competitive game? Well, there's no one better than Mr. Faceless himself, the Spy. Playing the Spy in Team Fortress 2 is already about fooling the enemy team. When being pursued, you can turn invisible and then juke to lead a pyro on a wild goose chase. Heck, his main skill is making you think he's your teammate. There's an achievement for convincing medics to heal you and then thanking them with a fractured spine. And with the Dead Ringer, he can even fake his own death. But today, I'm going to recount to you a favorite strategy of some metagamers, and by doing so, lessen the chances of this still being a viable strategy. This is the Sexy Spy Backstab. Step 1. Find a picture of a hot girl on the internet and set it as your spray paint in Team Fortress 2. Some practitioners of this strategy will tell you to find one that is half naked, but you'd be surprised how desperate some of these players are to see any kind of girl. Sorry, fanbase. And for the record, I know lots of people play this game and not just heterosexual men, don't interrupt. Step 2. Equip the spy with the knife and cloak of your choice. For best results, I recommend your Eternal Reward and the Cloak and Dagger. Step 3. Spray the artwork onto walls or floors near your enemy's spawning points. Pick a spot not too secluded but not too traffic heavy, back up a little, turn invisible, and wait for the fish to bite. I've never done this myself since I find the whole thing kind of distasteful, but I've seen it on YouTube and I'm not going to lie, it's pretty darn hilarious. And I was surprised how many kills some players can get in a row by doing this. I think Team Fortress 2 is a great venue for it. Players want to do well, but nobody's ever taken the game too seriously. And shenanigans like this are fairly commonplace. Most players will just get mad enough to want to get a revenge kill on you, but if you're lucky, you'll single out the ones who just really want to stare at that picture and come back for a second try. In that case, consider using the Spicicle to freeze them, thus erecting a monument to their foolish libido.
Gentlemen?
Alright, don't be scared, it's just number 3. Frights are a staple in the history of April Fool's pranks, be it a long drawn-out fear or a cheap but oh so satisfying jump scare. I'll try to keep these jump scares from being too startling to you, the viewer, but just be warned if you have a low tolerance for recycled horror game footage. I think for a horror game, the best jumps are about breaking what the player thinks are established rules. As much as I love Amnesia: The Dark Descent, you do notice a formula that is ghouly and is usually going to show up after every major puzzle. So how about a psychological thriller that is so unexpectedly meta that it can scare the player on a whole different level? From the eldritch pits of despair comes Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem for the GameCube. A lot of people talk about this, so the surprise is kind of ruined already. But in this game, you have a sanity meter that depletes as creepy catastrophes are stumbled upon. As it gets lower, your character's grip on reality gets looser with things not behaving the way they should, and if it hits 0, you're gonna have a bad time. Okay, so we have the shaking camera, yeah, my vision is blurry. Oh no, the statue's head is moving! Nothing terribly creative. Hey, am I sitting on the remote? Oh no, the game's actually pretending to lower the volume on my TV. Well then let's just combat that by turning the volume back. Most infamously, there's the blue screen of death, and most stressful is a scenario where the game's menu gives you no other option than to delete all of the save data on your GameCube's memory card. It doesn't really delete it, but listen, Eternal Darkness, you do not joke about someone's save data. Is nothing sacred to you? I can think of a lot of other games that pull this on you. Scarecrow in Arkham Asylum, Hades in Kid Icarus Uprising, Psycho Mantis fills a similar niche. Even Mr. Resetti is in on this joke. But Eternal Darkness is the first to try this in a horror setting, at least to my knowledge, filling its scare quota by making players uncomfortable on a 4th dimensional level. Good joke, but nothing I would lose my head over. What the crap? Well, I am certainly surprised. I mean, Hamlet Act 3 Scene 2? I thought for sure they would pick the York monologue from Act 5 Scene 1. Keeping me on my toes, guys. Who needs psychological horror when you can have horror psychology? Before Resident Evil was a mediocre summer blockbuster disguised as an action series, it was the best action game ever to be set in a horror setting. And before that, it was actually a horror franchise. Not that I hate modern Resident Evil, again, Resident Evil 4 is a treasure, but I do miss when third-person horror had the rawness of Resident Evil 1. Yeah, I'm talking muddy graphics and terrible dialogue. Jill's sandwich. Resident Evil was a very effective fear fest, especially against living things, and I think people forget why. If I had to quantify it, it was a pureed mixture of 40% suspense, 40% atmosphere, 15% situation, and 5% irony. By irony here, I'm talking about what the players come to expect and mushing it into their face. Which brings me to this gem of a moment, the L-shaped corridor. By this point in the game, you think you've gotten the pattern. Scary part, calm part, scary part, calm part. We started with zombie dogs in the fields, but then we got to the lobby and could decompress for a second. We graduated to human zombies, but after our first encounter with them, we were rewarded with a little break before no doubt moving on to face more reanimated human corpses. After one of these more hectic sections, we arrive at this famous hallway, homely decorated like the safe zones. Not like the designated zombie rooms. Ow, why am I even trying to delay this? Watch out for the window! Oh no! I forgot about the dogs! You lied to me, game! I thought these rooms were safe!
I never said that. I never said hallways were safe.
You totally implied it though, you pedant! The dog will jump through after you've already cleared that window, so if your natural instincts as an edible human being kick in, you'll no doubt sprint further down the hallway and... No! Again! Twice! 2 dogs! No! There's a good deal of planning put into this moment, all for probably the most memorable jump scare this side of Five Nights at Freddy's. If this were a simple lie, like if the game labeled this as a safe zone and put the zombies in anyway, that would be another thing. But the game never breaks its own rules, it just breaks the things you thought were rules. Then it tells you to go change your pants and pay more attention next time. Oh, okay. But there better not be any giant snakes in the next room. Number 1 isn't nearly as elegant as some of the previous pranks. It doesn't really teach an important game mechanic, it doesn't really have much significance to the rest of the game. It's a very personal choice, but this small, negligible moment of one of the most influential games in history has such a special place in my memory, and in most gamers' memories, I'm sure, that it inspired me to make this list in the first place. Before I spoil it by over-narrating, I'm going to just let the moment speak for itself. Did you see that? Okay, I know it wasn't the twist of the century, but when I was playing this game for the first time in 1996, this blew my mind. I don't care how minute this is, I'm going to analyze the stuffing out of it. Let me give this to you from the perspective of little 90s Oscar. First of all, do you remember when Bowser was smart? When you enter the castle at the beginning of the game, he lets you know he's always watching you. How? I don't know, but he's bolstering his defenses and even set up this little trap for you. Second, for the first commercially and technically successful 3D platformer ever, I really thought I was getting to the end of the game. I still expected a boss fight, sure, but I thought Peach was really in that painting. This game already had 5 sandbox-style levels that seemed like a lot of content at the time, and there wasn't really a precedent for how many levels were in a free-roaming 3D game. To me, it was like a tech demo for 3D gameplay, and if this were leading up to the end, I probably would have been satisfied. The internet wasn't around at the time, and I wasn't subscribed to Nintendo Power yet, so I had no way of knowing how far I actually was from saving the princess. 3. The actual mechanics of the trap. Like with the cake dispensary, Mario needs to fall into this pit to continue the game, unless you plan to exploit some glitches. But that doesn't mean it can dupe the player. The forced perspective makes the hallway look longer than it is. The sequence of opening the door with the stars is a little too long for comfort, so I want to get a move on. And the funneling shape of the room psychologically influenced me to run forward. Real-world architects use that type of design all the time to keep patrons from crowding the doorways and lobbies. 4. The game already taught me that paintings were how I got into levels, since all accessible worlds so far were like that except for Big Boo's haunt, so I had expectations that the game dashed. 5. The slow change to Bowser's face gives me just enough time to realize that something's not right, but by the time it registers with me, it's too late and I'm in the hole. This isn't the most hilarious example on this countdown, but I have to admit it was funny in a subtle way, like with Clubba. And, I'll admit, it's a little bit scary. I still haven't seen 3D Bowser yet, and the coloring and the crude 3D models in this game make me a little anxious without giving me a heart attack like those damn dogs. Still, I don't feel like I'm being punished. I don't lose a life, and in fact, this is exactly where I need to go. Plus, I get to play a really cool level now. But I'm on edge now because the biggest challenge I've yet faced in this game came a little sooner than I had anticipated. And again, like GLaDOS, I thought that I had the jump on Bowser, but now I find that he has the jump on me. This makes me really excited to continue this adventure, which it turns out isn't even a third of the way over yet. Is this moment short? Yeah. Is it stupid? Probably. But you know what? That's what April Fool's Day is all about. Quick distractions and misdirections that make you feel something and keep everybody having a good time. A celebration of the simple but brilliant. I am the Green Scorpion, and if you don't think this was a good number 1, let me remind you that this wasn't a Rickroll. Happy April, everybody.